Chapter 5 Reasons. Translator, Transcend. Editor, Mel. The second law of thermodynamics. Heat can never pass from a colder to a warmer body without causing other effects, or it is impossible to convert heat from a single source into work without causing other effects, or entropy always increases in an irreversible heat reaction. Roland carefully wrote this down using the language of this world. At a glance, the text resembled a moving earthworm, and he really didn't understand how the locals could learn so many complicated characters. If asked which of the physical laws was the most depressing, Roland would definitely choose the second law of thermodynamics. It states that heat will always pass from high to low temperatures, thus adding chaos to order and increasing entropy. Eventually, everything will become nothing, and the universe will become morbidly silent. Somehow, this world was exempt from the issue of increasing entropy. It could produce magic power out of nothing, which was much more impressive than a perpetual motion machine. The forces of evil, Roland scoffed to himself. The people here don't see the nature of this power, which could possibly change the entire universe. Of course, he could start by changing this small border town. Roland hummed a tune, tore up the paper he had written, and threw it into the fireplace, where it was reduced to ashes, feeling a sudden joyous freedom. The assistant minister was confused by Prince Roland's actions, but fortunately for Roland, the old prince had always acted this strangely, and Barav could see that the prince was in a good mood. "It's been done. The witch was hanged at noon," reported Barav. "Good. Could anyone tell?" Roland asked while writing. "All of the condemned wear hoods anyways." In order to prevent trouble with the Holy Church and the Witch Cooperation Association, Roland ordered the prison warden to find a death row criminal with a similar figure and use her to replace Anna. At the gallows, besides the chief knight and assistant minister, everyone who was with him in the dungeon was given 20 gold royals of hush money, which was a huge amount for them. Barav even suggested killing all of the witnesses to ensure total silence, but Roland rejected this. He knew he couldn't prevent this secret from spreading, but this didn't matter because he actually wanted someone to spread the word, just not now. He would clash with the church sooner or later, since he couldn't tolerate those idiots would waste such valuable resources. If other witches heard there was a town where they could live freely and even get special treatment, what would they think? No matter the era, talent and human resources were the most important. "Good," Roland said, "and next I need you to give me a summary of the past year's trade, taxes, and expenditures. I would also like you to record the numbers and sizes of steel, textile, and pottery workshops in the city. I'll need 3 days to prepare these records, but..." Barav first nodded, but then fell short of words. "What is the matter?" Roland asked, knowing that his ability to lie was about to be tested. Barav undoubtedly had questions about what happened yesterday, since although a scoundrel would always be a scoundrel, having a bad character didn't also mean being brainless. In the eyes of the assistant minister, harboring a witch was akin to declaring war on the world. "Your Highness, I don't understand." Barav wrestled with his words. "Although you've caused trouble in the past, it was always harmless, but now, risking so much only to save a witch, it was the church that passed the law to hunt them, but even your father, His Majesty Wimbledon Roman III, supports it." Roland thought for a moment and asked, "Do you believe that this border town is a good place to live in?" This. Barav didn't understand what this question had to do with the problem, but eventually answered truthfully, "Not really. It's awful, compared to Valencia or the port of Clearwater. What do you feel my chances are against my siblings of gaining the throne?" The assistant minister opened his mouth but didn't answer, almost 0, so I can only choose another path. Roland watched expressionlessly as Barav walked into his trap. "A path that would even impress my father." He did not argue that witches were not inherently evil, because it would be useless. Barav had been the assistant minister of finance for 20 years, and was a pretty competent politician. For politicians, personal gain was more important than moral law. Also, if Roland recalled the previous prince's actions correctly, using emotion wasn't typical of him because he wasn't considered as a righteous person. So, he chose to use the eternal conflict between religious and secular authority, as the expanding power of the Holy Church was a constant issue for Wimbledon Roman III. The Church claimed that the world worked under the will of God, and that the Pope was the voice of God. If the people found what he said was full of lies, the dominance of the Holy Church would be greatly undermined. It would be hard to convince the assistant minister by saying, "Witches are not evil, so I want to save them," but replaced with "Witches are not evil, and I can use them to attack the Church." Barav could easily be persuaded. No matter how the territories of my brothers and sisters flourish, everything will eventually be in the possession of the Church. They had already declared the divine right of kings, which states that rightful rulers must be blessed by the Pope. So are we even the real rulers of this land? Roland paused and said, "My father will see a new hope in me, a leader who isn't suppressed by the Church and who holds all the exclusive rights of a royal king, and his choice will be very clear." Then, changing the enemy of the entire world into enemy of only the Church was easier to accept, especially since Barav himself stood on the side of the royal family. Similarly, if he realizes that witches have extraordinary powers that could aid in fighting the Church, the execution orders will be nothing more than a joke. While there is no possibility to guarantee success, it's not impossible either. Do you think it's worth the risk? Roland stared at the assistant minister as he said, "Don't doubt me, Barav. You've been an assistant minister for 20 years, right? If I can become Wimbledon Roman IV, I could remove the assistant part. Or even make you hand of the king." Watching Barav leave, Roland felt relieved. It was obvious that he didn't think much of this promise, which was normal, since even Roland himself did not believe that this hasty and bold plan could be achieved. However, it was more important to convince Barav of his seriousness. This simple plan, thought up by a sheltered noble son, reflected Prince Roland's hatred towards the Church and paved the way for attracting more witches. As for his real thoughts, even if Barav knew, he wouldn't be able to understand them. Roland summoned the maid. "Tell Miss Anna to come to see me." Now back to business, Roland thought happily. Chapter 6, Training, Part I. In the rear castle garden stood a single cottage, surrounded by a wooden fence. The cottage was built out of clay bricks, and the ground was filled with loess, a mixture of sand, silt, and clay. There was also a pond in front of the cottage with a circumference of roughly 9.5 yards, and with the pond filled with an appropriate amount of river water. This environment was not only difficult to burn, but also had a certain manufactured feel. It seemed to be taken right out of a dream. Piled atop the ground were several iron ingots. These came from the blacksmith, and were placed there by Carter. The pond was very charming. Roland had immediately taken a fancy to this place, but as for a laboratory, this place was still too crude. Roland shook his head, realizing that using some random materials and having them build a perfect lab was not possible. If he could find a suitable place in the future and collected all the resources, he would get Barav to start making him a workshop. Calling Anna over, who had been resting in the cottage, Roland asked, "How are you? Did you sleep well?" Looking at the bewildered Anna who emerged, Roland smiled. The witch Roland saw now and the witch he saw yesterday looked like two completely different people. After a thorough cleaning, her long flaxen hair draped over her shoulders like a shawl and had a soft and shiny luster. Although her skin hadn't been maintained due to her rough life as a commoner, her youth made up for it, and the light dusting of freckles which were on the bridge of her nose added a youthful vitality to her face. Her body was still thin and looked as if a strong breeze could push her down, but her cheeks, with a rosy color, and the bruises and marks on her neck were much faded from yesterday. Roland suspected that witches received an improvement of their physical capabilities in addition to their magic. At least Anna's recovery rate had to be much faster than the average person's. Originally, since you experienced so many terrible things, you should be allowed to rest a few days. However, our need at this time is very urgent, so I'll compensate you later," Roland said before telling the girl to turn around in a circle. "This dress, does it fit well?" Anna now wore clothes he had carefully selected from a variety of styles, all in order to satisfy his lewd tastes. The full protective clothing that the iron workers wore was too thick and not suitable for her, while the robes many mages wore in games appeared to be elegant and classy. In real life, they restricted the mobility of the wearer and would quickly be turned to ashes. As for maid dresses, hey, is there any better clothing than this? Even if this world had no modern maid outfits, yet it was not a big problem. The usual maid clothes were what the later generations were based on after all. So Roland directly took a set of clothes from Tyre and cut it to Anna's size, shortened the skirt, changed the long sleeves to short sleeves, made the round neck collar become folded, and then tied it into a bow, thereby creating the new witch uniforms. This was matched with a witch hat customized, black boots ready, as well as a knee-length cape ordered. In the past, Roland could only see this type of costume in a movie, but right now, one stood in front of him, looking so much like a witch from Earth lore. "Your Highness, what do I need to do for you?" Anna asked. Anna really could not keep up with the ideas of the great man in front of her. She felt that she was losing her ability to judge the situation. Being dragged out of the dungeon with a bag over her head, she believed she would soon be liberated of her cursed life. But after taking off the headgear, Anna found herself not seeing the gallows or the guillotine, but a magnificent room. Then a bunch of people flooded in, undressing and bathing her. From her armpits to toes, nothing was left unpolished. Next, it was the dressing room. Anna did not expect that she would have needed all these dresses to serve someone. She also never knew that clothes could actually be so comfortable as they laid gently on her body. It was possible to feel the slightest friction. Finally, a white, bearded old man had entered the room, and after he ordered everyone else to step out, he had placed a contract in front of her. At this moment, Anna realized the man who had said he wanted to hire her in the dungeon was actually this kingdom's fourth prince. When he said he wanted to employ her, it was not a joke. The contract clearly stated that if she worked for the prince, she would be paid a gold royal every month. Of course, Anna knew what receiving a gold royal a month meant. Her father, who had worked in the mine all day, had had his pay determined by the amount of ore he was able to mine, but the best haul he ever had was only worth 1 silver royal. 100 silver royals could be converted to a gold royal, and even this depended on the purity of the silver royals. So was her job to accompany the prince while sleeping. When she was bathing, Anna had heard the maids whispering, but she didn't think she was worth this price. With her blood tainted by the devil, she was a person full of filthiness. After she was exposed, everyone knew her real identity. Even if the prince's curiosity was compelling to this extent, even if he did not fear the devil, he did not need to pay her any remuneration at all. That night, however, no one came, and she fell asleep peacefully. It was the softest bed Anna had ever slept in, so she just laid down and immediately fell asleep. The next day, when she opened her eyes, it was already noon. Lunch had already been served in her room. Delivered were bread with cheese and meats. Before, she had obviously been ready to die. She had even decided to willingly give up her life to atone for her sins. Those were her original thoughts, but after tasting the luxurious meal, Anna could not help it. Tears started running down. Sauces and seasonings were mixed within her mouth, a strong hint of a spicy flavor mingled with a sweet taste, attacking, again and again, her taste buds. Suddenly, she felt that the world was a little bit brighter. Anna felt that if she could eat this food every day, then even if demons attacked her body, she would have more courage to resist, right? Now standing in this garden which resembled an old temple, nothing like her prison cell, Anna secretly made up her mind. Since the other party needed her, so whether it was to wear strange clothes, or even using the incredible devil's power, she was willing to try. So she repeated her question, but this time she did not hesitate. "Your Highness, what do you need me for?" "Right now, I want you to learn to control your own strength. Try it over and over until you can send out your flames and receive them back freely." "You mean the devil's?" No, Miss Anna," Roland interrupted her. "This is your power." The witch blinked with her eyes, her beautiful, big blue eyes. Most people in the world have the misconception that the powers of the witches belong to the devil, that they are incredibly evil, when, in fact, they are wrong. Roland bent his body down and met her eyes with his own on an equal level. "But you already figured that out, right?" Roland remembered Anna's chuckle in the dungeon. Would a person who felt they were evil have laughed with such self-mockery? "I did not use my power to hurt anyone else," she murmured, "except for that looter." "Self-defense is not a sin. You did the right thing. People fear you because they do not understand you. They only know that with training witches can become strong fighters, but they do not know how to become a witch. Unknown power is always scary." "You're not afraid," Anna said. "Because I know your power belongs to you," Roland laughed. "But if that looter had such an incredible strength, I wouldn't calmly stand in front of him." "Well, let's get started," he said. Chapter 7, Training, Part Roman 2. The fire rose up from under her feet, but soon faded away. This was already her 23rd attempt, and she had failed again. On Anna's forehead, beads of sweat constantly arose, but she just used the back of her hand to swipe them away, and the crackling sound of rising flames immediately sounded out again. With no stops to rest, the end of an exercise was followed by the start of the next one. The witch uniform lied at the side, neatly folded. If Anna had not insisted on doing so, her new uniform would have already been burned to ashes. Fortunately, with Roland's identity as the fourth prince, getting a few spare robes for her to use was not difficult. He had his maid Tyre deliver a whole bucket of robes, gathered by the maids for Anna to use. The 24th practice had finally been effective. The flame was no longer rising from her feet. Instead, it appeared on her hand. She gingerly moved her arm to try and have the flame go to her fingertips, but the flame suddenly shook twice and rose up her arm, setting her sleeve on fire, even spreading from the sleeve to engulf the whole robe. Anna dismissed the flame, but her robe was already completely burnt, so she turned to the bucket and got a new one. This wasn't the first time this had happened, but whenever it did, Roland would look away, so that his eyes were staring at other places, even if Anna herself didn't care about it. As a matter of fact, if it weren't for Roland's strong objections, she would probably have taken off all her clothes and practiced in the nude, in broad daylight. But even if Roland were to get a good view of her great figure that way, he wouldn't be able to calmly work with a naked girl, especially when the girl turned into flames and her body gave off an entirely different kind of charm. Roland shook his head, leaving his dirty thoughts behind. For the moment, it seemed that it was not easy to master the power of magic. The actual goal he had set for Anna was that she should control the flame to such a degree that she could release her flames from her palm or her fingers without destroying her own clothes. However, he also wanted the flames to have a high enough temperature to melt the iron ingots that were in the yard. After Anna's 30th attempt had failed, but before she could make the next one, Roland stopped her and told her to take a break. Anna looked at him in a startled fashion, but she gave no other response. Roland had to walk over. He even had to pull the girl by her hand, leading her to the chair and forcing her to sit down. "You are tired. When you are tired, you should rest. Do not be too impatient. We still have some time." He helped her wipe the sweat off of her moist forehead and said, "Let us consume an early afternoon tea." Roland knew that the nobility of the kingdom of Greycastle did not have the habit of drinking afternoon tea, and this world's productivity was so poor. For ordinary people, it was hard to have the opportunity to taste such delicate food. The people in this world were not familiar with 3 meals a day, not to mention a 4th meal. As for the noble sons, they generally gathered together around this time to have some fun in bars or casinos. The prince himself had to temporarily take over for the maid and cook if he wanted to create the custom here, since they weren't familiar with it. Since he had to prepare some light refreshments, and they didn't have any tea, he was forced to substitute ale. It would be important to get some tea in the future. So in the castle's rear gardens, in a wooden cottage, the first afternoon tea party of the Greycastle kingdom was held. Anna looked at the dishes of exquisite snacks, not believing her eyes, since when could something to eat look so good? Although she did not know the specific name of the cake she ate, it was pure white in appearance, and the bright red collection of fruit could make people feel their appetite increasing. Especially seeing the edges of the pastry decorated in an exquisite pattern, all of this forced her to change her world. You once again. Roland proudly observed Anna's bewildered expression. She looked like a country bumpkin, but also slightly frightened. Although the strawberries on the cream cake were marinated in sugar and didn't even taste fresh, there was nothing left of the cake. Roland found that appreciating the witch's face while she ate was more satisfying than doing so himself. Roland watched Anna, who was carefully placing the cake into her mouth, her blue eyes almost releasing a ray of light, and her hair gently swaying in the wind. Seeing all this, his heart suddenly nearly burst, and he thought to himself, "It's not good to cook anything worse." Well, the cultivation of feelings as well as talent was also very important. Watching Anna while she practiced and accompanying her to enjoy the afternoon tea became Roland's daily life, not showing any interest in the government affairs. Barov helped him to take care so that everything was clear and orderly. 3 days later, Barov delivered the information of the border town's industry that he had asked for to Roland's office. This was an absolutely unbelievable moment. The former 4th prince actually had never the patience to see such a big pile of complicated reports. As a matter of fact, even now he didn't have it. Roland needed only to read 2 lines of text until he started to feel dizzy, and he directly said to Barov, "You will read it to me." He spent an hour listening to Barov until he found a mistake. Why were the border towns' annual winter taxes and trade revenues 0? Since the winter temperatures were low, the decline in the harvest could be understood, but what was the meaning of directly returning to 0? Had the local people the habit of hibernation? Barov coughed. "Sir, did you forget? In the winter months, it's the time of the months of the demons. The town has no ability to guard its borders. All the residents must evacuate to Longsong's stronghold, but rest assured, your safety is certainly the first priority." Months of the demons. Roland seemed to recall having heard that phrase before. He didn't take the take of ghosts and the legends of wicked witches seriously. He considered it as part of this uncivilized world's nonsense. But now it seems that the monsters are not a fantasy, since the witches actually do exist. Then, what about the other famous legends like ghosts? When he got his education as a noble, his history tutor had explained the month of the demons in detail. Every winter, after the first snow fell and the sun had gone behind the mountains, an intense darkness without light would descend. At that moment, the gates of hell would open. The evil spirits from hell would corrupt living creatures and turn them into the slaves of the devil. Some of the animals would change into powerful demon beasts with only one goal: to attack humans. Most witches were born in this season, and their power would be far stronger than usual because of it. "Have you seen them, the gates of hell?" Roland asked. "Your Highness, how can ordinary people go see them?" Barov shook his head again and again. "Don't say nonsense. The mountains they come from cannot be conquered. Even being close to the mountains, you will be affected by the foul miasma, first getting a mild headache, and then, in severe cases, even losing your mind, unless... Unless what? Unless the person doing it is a witch. Only a witch can go and see the gates of hell, because they have fallen from grace and became the devil's minions. Naturally, they don't need to fear the touch of evil. Mentioning witches, Barav glanced in the direction of the garden. The demonic monsters, have you ever seen one? Roland knocked on the table to recapture the assistant minister's attention. Well, I haven't seen them. Like your highness, this is my first time coming to the kingdom's borders. In the center of the country, in the castle, only a few people would have encountered the real demons. If he needed to evacuate once a year, how would he be able to develop this place? He initially thought that the border town was a barren land, but that it still had the potential for development, but now it seemed to be a pipe dream. When we resist the demonic beasts in Longsong's stronghold, when they aren't invincible, and when they can be killed, then why can't we defeat them in this border town as well? Longsong's stronghold has a high wall. Also, the Duke Ryan's elite troops are stationed there. It is nothing like this border town. This small place definitely cannot be compared to it. Barav explained from the start, the establishment of the border town was to provide an early warning to the stronghold. Therefore, the town was set between the slope of the North Mountain and the Kishui River. So, his town was only cannon fodder to block the enemy, the only path they could cross. Roland laughed grimly as he heard this. Chapter 8 Months of the Demons, Part 1. If Roland wanted to develop his territory well, he had to build strong roots in this place. Even though this land was a wasteland, it could be easily reclaimed. When the territory was too small, it could be expanded outwards, but all talk was useless if the people weren't willing to stay. If they could be forced to abandon a plot of land at any time, then who would be willing to purchase it? Who would want to improve its production? After the assistant minister left, Roland called in Knight Commander Carter and ordered, "Assemble your men. Go and find some of the local guards, hunters and farmers. They must have lived here for more than 5 years and experienced the months of the demons. If there is someone who can fight it, would be even better." After the knights saluted and left, Roland rubbed his forehead, continuing to look at the data compiled by the assistant minister. The main exports of the border town were from mining and hunting, and the bulk of the imports were food items. Everything would be transported through Longsong Stronghold or directly through the Kishui River in Willow Town. The mining exports contained all kinds of minerals like iron, copper, sulfur, rock crystal, ruby, sapphire. This was completely against the concept of associated minerals. He thought of what Anna had said to him, that the North Mine had been rumored to be an unknown underground lair. Until now there was no proven bottom to the mine, and it was also unknown how many forks the mine had. The minerals exported by the town weren't paid for with the kingdom's gold royals. Instead, they were paid for with the foodstuffs that arrived. It stands to reason that, since the gems could be regarded as a high-priced luxury, that in these last 5 years the border town could save a surplus of grain, but in the end there was no surplus. In other words, the annual output of the mining of the border town was only enough for 2,000 people's yearly rations. Before the prince arrived here, the border town was governed by the duke, who also took charge of Longsong's stronghold, and he had set up this arrangement. In his point of view, he could save food and had a warning for the monsters. The fur trade was part of the local people's own proceeds. They ventured into the westward forest, hunted some birds and other animals, maybe sold them to the Longsong stronghold or to the residents of the small town of Willowleaf. Because of this, no transaction would be made in the border town, and so no tax could be collected. Roland thought, since he came, it couldn't go on in this way. The minerals could no longer be paid for with food. The Kishui River ran through the whole kingdom, and the traffic was not blocked. There was a transportation artery. Even if we would no longer buy food from the Longsong stronghold, there were still other places to provide them. This was all built on the premise that he could stay here in the border town, blocking those damn monsters. Carter worked quickly. By the next day he had found 2 local guards and a hunter and reported, "These 2 men are from the town patrol. Every year they are responsible for lighting the beacon." Hunter said he and the demons had crossed paths. He returned with a demon beast head, which he cut off with his own hands. The 3 people bowed simultaneously. Roland nodded, permitting them to stand up. One of them stepped forward to speak. "Honor, respected Prince, Your Highness, the first guard who was called up was too nervous to even speak clearly. Brian and I are the people, when it begins to snow we'll go to the north slope of the mining area, to the beacon tower there it's first possible. It is the first point to see the demon movements. If they cross over in great numbers, we will conceal ourselves in the forest, ignite the flames from childhood. The road we will withdraw at, and the boat is prepared previously. Then we leave. Since you both were together, let your partner answer it." Roland covered his face to hide his disapproval. "The demon beasts, can they be killed?" The other guard was also very nervous, but at least he did not stammer. "Your Highness, it should be so. They were just ordinary animals in the forest, but through the influence of the evil miasma, they become manic and ferocious, but they can still be killed. Every month of the demons in the past, Longsong Stronghold would send cavalry, cleansing the land from the stronghold to border town, the remnants of the demon monsters." "The months of the demon last how long?" Roland asked. "Generally 2 to 3 months. It depends on the sun," said Brian. "Depends on the sun?" Roland asked doubtfully. "Yes." The guard explained, "Your Highness came to this town not long ago, so you do not know. In this border town, once the snow begins to fall, it will not stop until the sun shines again. Then the snow will be gone. So the snow indicates the end of the months of the demon." Roland recalled that at least in Grey Castle, it was not like this. Basically, the next day it would end to snow. Also, the sun would seem to be different. "It is exactly like this. The longest time I experienced the months of the demon was 2 years ago. That lasted nearly 4 months. Many people starved." "Why shouldn't be the grain reserves in Longsong Stronghold be large enough to support the town?" Roland asked. Brian's face got a little angry. They had enough. But Reynolds, the municipal administrator who is responsible for managing such things, declared that the amount of ore and minerals mined was only enough to buy food for 3 months. For the 4th month we had to deliver a new shipment of ore. But the months of the demons had not ended. We couldn't leave the fortress. "So that was what happened. I got it. They were simply alienating the fool people." If Longsong Stronghold treats these people who are living on the frontier with this kind of warmth like a spring wind, the frontiersmen would most likely want to stay and not leave, but at the moment it seems that the group of people behind Longsong Stronghold were not the good-natured sort. Roland beckoned the last person forward to answer, while putting the name of the administrator into his heart. The 3rd man looked courageous and strong, with a height of over 6 feet, making Roland feel great pressure. Fortunately, he came forward on his knees. "You said you killed the beast." "Yes, sir." His voice was low and hoarse. "A wild boar species and a wolf species." "Species?" Roland repeated. "What do you mean?" "This is the name of the demonic beast, Your Highness. The more fierce the variation of the animals was before, the more difficult it would be to deal with variation after, and they will emphasize the advantages of the body. The wild boar, its back fur would become extremely tough. Even within a range of 50 yards, it would be difficult to hurt it with a crossbow. The wolf species becomes more cunning, the running speed becomes amazing. To kill it, you need to set up the trap in advance. Stronger would become stronger and faster even faster." Roland nodded as he heard this. "But they are still animals." "They are, but they are not the most terrible kind of enemy." The hunter said until here, and then he had to swallow his saliva before he was able to talk further. "The worst ones are the mixed species. They are devils incarnate. Only hell is able to create such a horrible monster. I have seen a hybrid. It had not only beast-like strong limbs, but on his back was even a pair of huge wings, allowing it to fly short distances, and it always knew where I was. No matter how much I tried to hide, it could always detect me. It was not hunting its prey, Your Highness, it was just teasing the prey. The hunter Li, who lifted his clothes, showing a large scar extending from the abdomen to his chest, as he said, I lost my consciousness and fell into the Kishui River. I was lucky to survive. Such a monster exists. Roland felt that the world became more and more like a fantasy. A strong wall can block all ordinary kinds of demonic beasts, but if they could fly, what should he do? Mixed species should be very rare, right? Chapter 9 Months of the Demons, Part 2. Not many, Your Highness, the hunter replied. During every months of the demons, there will only appear 2 to 3 mixed species demons. Otherwise, Longsong's stronghold would be in huge trouble. Well, you seem to be very observant. Roland ordered the man to stand up and asked, What's your name? You don't look like a man from my kingdom of Greycastle. Half of my lineage hails from the Majin clan. The townspeople call me Iron Axe. Majin clan, the people from the Shamin kingdom, located southwest of the Barren Lands. It was said that they were the descendants of giants. Roland searched within his brain for any memories related to the Majin clan, and realized that Iron Axe did not use the name his clan called him by, rather using the name given by the people of Border Town, and apparently he did not want to have a relationship with the Shamin kingdom. As for why, since it was obvious that he was from the southwestern border of the desolate lands, he estimated that there were a series of sad stories involved. But for the moment, those stories weren't important. Everyone was welcome in Border Town, regardless of his or her background. Roland clapped his hands. That's not why I asked you to be here. Carter, bestow each of them with 10 silver royals, then they can leave. Thank you very much for the reward, Your Highness, said the 3 in unison. Afterwards, the people were taken away by Carter. When he had finished his task, Carter returned once again and asked, Your Highness, why did you ask them these questions? Do you want to stay here? Roland didn't express any opinion and instead asked, What do you think? This matter is out of question, Your Highness, said the knight loudly. According to the statement from the hunter, even a wild demon bear would be difficult to cope with. Outside of 50 yards, a shot with a crossbow would have no effect. We would have to wait until it closed to 40 yards, or even until 30 yards before making our shot. Only our elite soldiers can accomplish this. Plus, the demons are too numerous, and we can't rely on strong walls, only standing side by side with the local guards to stop them. I'm afraid that the casualties would outstrip the accomplishments. Our defeat would be assured. You already saw what a witch is able to do, so why do you can't think positively? Roland sighed. The witches are evil, but Miss Anna does not look so. As your knight commander, I have to seek truths by looking for facts. If I would give you a city wall, would you think it will be possible? What? For a moment, Carter suspected that he had heard wrong. If I give you a wall between the north slope of the mountain and the Kishui River. Roland stressed every word he said, although they would not be like the enormous walls from Greycastle, but to stop animals, they should still be able to. Sir, do you know what you are saying? The knight didn't know whether to be angry or to laugh. Even your nonsense should have a limit. If you don't stop, you will have to excuse my lack of manners. We still have 3 months, don't we? I looked at the past records. The first snow usually falls here at the end of the 2nd month from now. Even if we had 3 years, it would not be enough. Building a wall would require many workers. For setting the foundation, they have to compress the earth, and every 1 or 2 feet would have to be reinforced. Otherwise, it would have a high risk to collapse. This would be the simplest of the earthen walls. Carter shook his head again and again. Brick and stone walls are even more difficult to build, and it would need hundreds of masons who would first have to cut the stones or bake the clay into bricks. Afterwards, they would need to build it block by block. Your Highness, All walls were built this way, without exception, a city being built in the time of a day and a night that is only the stuff of legends. Roland indicated he had heard enough. I see. You don't need to be so upset. If there is no reliable wall in place, I will evacuate with you to Longsong Stronghold. I'm not going to give away my life in this place. The knight knelt down. I will protect you. Afterwards, in the beautiful castle gardens, Roland nipped at his bitter ale. Looking at Anna, who was intently eating cream cakes, his mood recovered a lot. He had decided to stop the demonic beasts at the border town, joining the elite soldier with the town guards. He would also intensify the farming by expanding the area the guards patrolled. If he wanted to build the wall, connecting the north slope of the mountain and the Kishui River within 3 months, he must use an appropriate technology from the modern times. It was not the case that Roland had suddenly thought of this. Previously he had checked the edges of the border town, although he didn't go personally. In his memory remained a clear picture. The northern slope of the mountain and the Kishui River were only separated by 600 yards at their closest point. It was a natural bottleneck. And due to the all-year-round mining in the North Mine, it was surrounded by rock gravel mined from the cave. These gravel cast-offs were ash-gray, containing plenty of calcium carbonates, which could be used as limestone after grinding. With the limestone, he had his solution. It would be equal to cement. Yes, this would change the history of mankind, to be able to build with a water-hardening material, with raw materials which were easily to obtain, which were simple to prepare. It truly numbered among one of the most efficient tools for tilling the fields. Roland estimated the needed time. Even if he would implement new technology, even with cement he wasn't sure if it was possible. The amount of cement they actually needed was too big. He wasn't sure if they could calcine so much cement powder within 3 months. And concrete toughness would be inferior. In the end they would need to reinforce it with steel. Thus the probability to succeed in building a concrete city wall was not that great. They had to maximize the usage of the existing materials and save cement, so building a fieldstone wall would be the most appropriate choice. The so-called fieldstone was a stone which had not undergone any grinding. It was just a natural byproduct of mining. This stone, because of the irregular shape of the edges and corners, there was no way to directly using it to build. Instead, it first need to be processed by the stonemason into usable bricks. But building a fieldstone wall while using cement as binder was possible, regardless of how oddly shaped the stone was it could be used. The gap between the stones was filled by the cement, saving cement and using leftover materials. With this, the big direction was set, but the actual implementation, he was afraid he would have to do it by himself, thought Roland. Regardless of whether it was the calcined cement or fieldstone wall, both were new things. Except for himself, no one had seen these things, and also no one knew how to make them. He was afraid he would be very busy for the next 3 months. You, look here. The sound of Anna's clear voice came from behind him. As Roland turned, he saw a small cluster of flames in her palm quietly burning. There was clearly no wind, but the flame tip was rising up and down as if it would nod to her. She shook her finger, and the fire was like a toddler, moving slowly towards the tip of the finger. In the end, it stood at the top of the index finger, simmering down. You did it! It was an incredible scene. Roland felt admiration from the bottom of his heart. This was not illusion magic, nor a chemical trick, but it really was a supernatural power. But this was not the most attractive thing to Roland. Many times more dazzling than the flame was Anna's look. While she was intently staring at her fingertips, the lake water limpid eyes were reflecting the vibrant flame, as if an elf sealed within a sapphire. The traces left from the prison torture had already faded, though she rarely smiled, but her face was no longer lifeless. On the young lady's tip of her nose was a speck of sweat. The rosy color on her white checks emitted vitality. Even looked at also can let a person feel cheerful mood. What happened to you? Ah, nothing. Roland noticed he looked at her for too long. He removed his gaze and coughed. Well, then, try using it to melt the iron. In the past few days, except for eating and sleeping, she always repeated her practice. In front of the hard-working enthusiast, Roland could only endlessly blush in shame, even in the face of college entrance examination. He did not work so hard. Apparently, she will not need long until she completely grasps this power, Roland thought. Following that, his ideas of new projects can be set on the agenda. TN for information about concrete and why it is logical that he was able to invent it. Chapter 10, The Stonemason. Translator, Transcend. Editor, Mel. The weather had been bad all week, and the sky was always gray. Carl Van Bate's mood was just like the weather, gloomy to the extreme. As he walked down the wet stone street, people greeted him from time to time. Carl ran a school in this town. Unlike the kingdom of Greycastle, where only the children of noble could go to school, here he taught the children of ordinary people. Therefore, he had a very high reputation in Border Town. Hey, Mr. Van Bate, good morning. Sir, is my son doing all right? When are you free, Carl? Let's go fishing together. Usually, Carl would always smile and respond to them, but today he just nodded, never saying a word. He had just witnessed Anna's hanging, so in his eyes there was a crack in the once perfect world, or this crack had begun to form since his departing from Greycastle, but he deliberately turned a blind eye. He used his busy work to numb himself, and to a certain extent he even used the innocent smile of the students to mend this crack. Until Anna died, he thought, the world had not changed, but after the hanging, the crack not only did not disappear, but expanded. His memories of Anna stopped at half a year ago. She didn't stand out of her class of more than 30 students with her normal appearance and few words, but there was something about her that impressed Carl deeply. It was her passion for knowledge. No matter what he taught, whether it was characters or history, she could always remember it on her first try. Even if it was the boring history and evolution of the religion, she could read about it all day. He had also seen the young lady help to take care of her neighbor's sheep sitting down in the sun. Anna would carefully brush the sheep's hair like someone would with a baby. He still remembered her sweet smile very clearly, and no matter how, he could not think of her as a sinister and evil person. Then, after the fire on Anna Street and her mother unfortunately passed away, Anna never came back to school. He never saw her again until a week ago, when she was proved to be a witch and hanged in the town square. Tempted by the devil, an unclean person, evil, all lies, he began to doubt the Holy Church and the knowledge they imparted for the first time in his life. He didn't know if Anna had been a witch or not, but she was never evil. If a teenage girl, ignorant of the world and full of curiosity, could be called evil, and then the administrative officials of the kingdom of Greycastle were from hell and possessed by the devil too. In order to save several hundred gold royals, they deliberately switched out the stone material used to build a theater, leading to its collapse and the death of more than 30 stonemasons. But were they hanged? Not even one. The judge finally ruled that the leader of the stonemasons was unsuitable for his job, and he was punished into exile, while the Mason Guild was forced to disband. Carl, who knew the true story, fled the kingdom of Greycastle, followed the road to the west, and eventually arrived in Border Town. He managed to establish a school with a lot of students, got to know his new neighbors, and find new friends, but the Greycastle officer's crime was always engraved in his mind. Now he felt the world was mocking him once again. Could the gods in heaven really recognize what was evil? The last straw for Carl was Nonna. Nonna and Anna were so different that one could even say they were the complete opposite. After class, you could always see her playing with birds or rolling around in the grass. If you asked what she was doing, she would giggle for a while before answering that she was looking at a fight between a grasshopper and ants. Nonna was always smiling. It seemed to be in her nature. She was completely oblivious of the world's sorrows, and at least at school she could continue smiling without a care. Carl was even curious if she had ever cried since she was born. 2 days ago, Nana suddenly came to him with tears in her eyes and asked, "Teacher, will I be hanged like Anna?" This told him that his student, Nana Pine, had become a witch. "Ah, isn't that Mr. Van Bate? Come over here and help us read what it says." Carl felt someone pull his sleeve and looked up to find that he had arrived at the town square. Many people stood around the bulletin board, and when they heard Van Bate's name, they all made a path for him. "You came just in time, sir. Please help us read it." "Yeah, Meg was supposed to read this to us, but he got a stomachache and had to go to the toilet, but he still isn't back yet." Usually, he would have nodded with a smile and explained in detail the contents of the bulletin board to everybody who listened. However, Carl found this impossible. The smiles and enthusiasm of these people were earnest, but this made it even more difficult to bear than if they were all pretending. The notice about Anna's hanging had also been placed here, and everyone had also discussed it this cheerily. "In a sense, you were all her murderer," he thought, "and your ignorance and fear had killed her." Carl suppressed his emotions, took a deep breath, and walked in front of the announcement list. "The prince calls for hands to help with the construction of new buildings for Border Town, and a variety of different kinds of jobs are available," he said. "But I'm also one of her killers, so why do I deserve to blame them? Wasn't I the one who taught them that witches were evil?" Carl had a bitter taste in his mouth. "Look at what I've taught these children. I followed every word of the church's doctrine, and I thought I was teaching them well, damn it. Stone grinder, male, 20 years to 40 years old, strong and healthy. Salary is 25 bronze royals per day. Mud craftsman, no gender limitations, over 18 years old, must have experience in masonry. Salary is 45 bronze royals per day. Handyman, male, over 18 years old. Salary is 12 bronze royals per day." No, he had to do something. If Anna's death was irreversible, at least he couldn't let Nana die. Carl heard his inner voice shout, when the Mason Guild collapsed, "You didn't do anything. When Anna was hanged, you didn't do anything. Are you also not going to do anything and watch this lovely child being dragged up to the gallows?" But what could he do? Could he escape with Nana out of Border Town? He had his own family, a family who traveled with him from Greycastle. Would he make them leave again just when their lives were getting better? Would Nana herself, who was born into a rich family, be able to leave her comfortable life? Stonemason, no gender limitations, no age limitations, long-term position for anyone who has participated in construction for the government. Salary is 1 gold royal per month. Additional term, people with rich experience and excellent performance may be granted an official position. After hearing the notice, the people became even noisier. 1 gold royal per month is even better than the salary for the stronghold cavalry. But can you do it? If you can't even build a mud pile, can you build a fortress? Don't just stare at it. Even the first few positions aren't bad. If you get paid every day, you'll earn the same amount as a hunter. Indeed, hunting is a life-threatening job, and the misty forest is a really dangerous place. Carl Van Bate did not pay attention to this chatter and only concentrated on the seal and signature at the foot of the notice. It was the autograph of Roland Wimbledon, the 4th prince. Did the prince not know that the months of the demons were already coming? Whatever he wanted to build, it was not a good time to start now. It seemed His Highness knew nothing about constructions, so if he could become a stonemason and catch his attention. Carl had suddenly an idea. Perhaps through this recruitment he could meet the prince himself, Border Town's highest ruler. Carl gulped in fear. Could he convince the prince that witches were not evil? There were rumors of His Highness' unique ideas, so he should be different from ordinary people, and he also hated the church deeply. Maybe I can do it, he thought. Although Anna's hanging was ordered by Prince Roland, everyone could tell that he was not willing to do it. The prince himself was still in his early 20s, which should make it easier to understand that these young girls were incapable of being evil. Of course, there was a possibility that Karl would be branded as a witch helper and have to go to the gallows with the witches. The church's law stipulated that anyone who protected a witch or begged for leniency should be regarded as the devil's minion. He could only hope that the prince's hate for the church also extended to its laws. Karl prayed in his heart. Even though he did not know which god to pray to, he closed his eyes and prayed for a blessing. For the sake of the dead Anna, for the sake of Nana, who was still alive, and for the sake of his own heart to stop breaking, he decided to take the risk.